Good evening, good afternoon, howdy, live, trance, and prosper. Hello, I'm Dr. Brian David Phillips, and I'd like to welcome you to the Experiential Trance Labyrinth. Just a short little introduction to labyrinths and trance work. Essentially, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of labyrinths, where they come from, where they originate, how they're used, and how they relate to experiential trance, and how you can draw one of your very own. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to clear up what exactly a labyrinth is. When we think of labyrinths, we'll think of mythological characters like Theseus and the Minotaur, and in Minos in Crete, in the ruins of the Minoan Empire, at the palace at Knossos, there actually was a labyrinth underground, the Cretan labyrinth, as you can see from the screenshot here, with our title card, Experiential Trance Labyrinth, and my name and all sorts of good stuff. You can see what's considered a classic Cretan labyrinth. Now, labyrinths didn't originate in Crete or in the Minoan Empire. They're actually much older. Human beings in pretty much every culture on the planet have used labyrinths of some sort. And this Cretan or Seventh Circuit, which I'll get into that later, type labyrinth, is one that's been found in many cultures, and often for meditative or trance introspection. Now, when we think of the Minotaur, we remember the word labyrinth, but we don't think of labyrinth in the classic sense. We think of mazes, a place that you go in and you can't find your way out. And classic labyrinths can be found in either mazes, like hedgework mazes, which is where you go in and you can't find, you have to keep making choices of left or right, and that's a maze. And here's a hint: if you're ever trapped in a maze and a monster's after you, choose a direction, left or right, and always turn left or always turn right. Don't go left and right, you'll get lost. Just either always turn left or always turn right, and eventually you'll get out of the maze. Now, the other type of classic labyrinth is the meander. Now, the meander is what you see here. The meander is basically, it's a path that goes in, convolutes in and around on itself, but it always goes in a single direction. You don't really get a choice. You feel like you're in a maze because of the convoluted nature of the piece, but you're not actually in a maze. You just keep following and you'll get to the center, and then you get your way out. Simple. Some are very complex, some are very simple, but that's essentially what you have with the meander versus the labyrinth. Now, there's different types of meanders that are used for meditative purposes, and they can be very complex or they can be very simple. Now, what we have here is the classic Cretan or Seven Circuit labyrinth, which is a meander style. Now, how do you use this? If you see my little pointer thing, I just follow. I go, hello, I'm outside the door. And I go inside the door and I simply follow the path. I just keep following. Now, watch what happens. I get a turn here and I'm still following the path. And oh my goodness, it turns again and I'm still following the path. And all I do is just continue to follow the path. La 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 la. And eventually what happens here, we do a little loop-de-loop guy. It feels like a maze, but you always just follow the path, and there we are in the inner sanctum, which is the meditative center of the piece. Essentially, boom, like this. You just follow the path, you will always get to the center, and then you finish your meditation and you come out. Now, the really nice way to do this is to enter it in trance. Now, there's different types of meanders. This is the seventh circuit meander, but you can see very simple structures. For instance, here's a classic 3-circuit labyrinth. It's called a left hand because it starts, you go enter on the left. There's also right hand labyrinths where you enter on the right, depending upon how it's designed and the nature of the piece. But this is a 3-circuit labyrinth. It's very simple. I enter here, hello, I enter here, and ba-da-da-da. And this is for a smaller space, and there I enter the shrine in the center if it's in a temple complex or something like that. A 3-circuit labyrinth. Also, we have 5-circuit labyrinths. La 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 la. And of course the 7-circuit, which I already showed you. This is a 7-circuit right hand. You turn to you eventually get into the center in the right hand. But those are different types of labyrinths. This is a more complex style here. This is called a mini Chartres, which feeds in upon itself. It's a much more complex design. So the meanders are much more complex. And if you enter in a trance or a prayer state, that can be a very beautiful experience. Of course, this is a miniature version of a much more complex design, which many of you probably are very familiar with, and that is the one at Chartres Cathedral. Now, if you look here, this looks incredibly complex. It only looks incredibly complex because it is incredibly complex. And if you go to the old cathedrals from the medieval period, you will sometimes find these in a sanctum. They're huge, and they're drawn out on the floor, and essentially what you do is you enter into the space. And these aren't walls, by the way. They look like walls, but you enter into the space and enter into a trance state and follow the path. And as you follow the path, you may be reading scripture or things like that. And this one gets all over the place. It's a very complex, very meditative. Honestly, if I could, if I had a huge home with a large outside area, I would love to have a hedgerow in this design. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's very conducive to a wonderful meditative state. So let's get to some other things. The structures of, back to our 7th circuit, our classic 7th circuits design, the parts of a labyrinth. What are they called? Well, of course, we have here the opening, which is the mouth of the labyrinth. And then, of course, you have the path or circuit. The path or circuit, and then you have the walls over here. You see it's just the borders. Now, the walls may be physical walls if you have millions of dollars to build a beautiful thing. It could be hedgerows or trees, or it could just be stone paths, or simply drawings. And actually, if you don't have a permanent space for your own labyrinth, you can actually purchase a mat or even rent them. In some countries, there are companies that you can rent a labyrinth design to throw out. It's a large cloth, often muslin or some other material that's quick, portable. You roll it up or unroll it onto the floor, and you can have a wonderful workshop for meditative trance, or you can just have one for yourself. Or if you have a permanent space, just draw it out nice and just paint on the floor. Or if you really, really want to go for it, make yourself a beautiful hedgerow kind of space. That takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of work, but of course some folks will do that. But you've got your walls, and of course we have the goal, which is an inner sanctum. This could be a very simple, in the classic, it's just a simple little place, and it might have, if it's related to a religious practice rather than a general trance work, you might have a shrine here or an altar for rituals or for prayer. Okay, and that's your goal. But this is the parts of the labyrinth, and then you have the process of going through the labyrinth, of course, is to walk that sucker, as the purple line here. You walk the labyrinth to the goal and that sort of thing. And of course, since this is a meditative process, you may want to be aware of, why do I keep calling it this is 7-circuit design? Because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circuits that go into toward the goal. And in the classic Minoan practice, which the Greeks borrowed from, and other cultures also borrowed from, there's a you can see that we count the circuits from the outside, but we enter in the mouth, and that puts us in the 3rd circuit. And each of these circuits, as we get to them, actually corresponds to, in the classic Crete process, it would have been a planet or an emotion or a day of the week. And so if we look here, it's color-coded for you for a reason, we enter first and we go through the 3rd circuit, and that 3rd circuit is related to Mars, and Mars is related to the emotions of desire and the day Tuesday. And then as we go through there, from the 3rd circuit we go into the 2nd circuit, and the 2nd circuit is Jupiter or self-identity or Thursday. And from the 2nd circuit we then get to the 1st or outer circuit, which of course is Saturn and the empirical mind or Saturday. And from there, that 1st circuit leads into the 4th circuit. And the 4th circuit, as you can see, is related to the sun and vitality and Sunday. And from there we get into the 7th circuit. And the 7th circuit, it's a short one, it's the moon. And the moon is related to Monday and form. And then we get into the 6th circuit, and that of course is Mercury, which is intuition, and Wednesday. And we get into the 5th circuit of Venus, pure mind, and Friday, which leads us into the inner sanctum. Now that is the classic Cretan or Minoan process, the meditative states that you would enter into. So each circuit you enter into a different trance practice or in a different emotional or meditative introspective state of mind. Now we can adapt this also to the chakras, and the chakras, of course, we go into the different chakras. Just remember them: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy, G, Bid. And that'll give you your colors, and they're associated with, of course, the root chakra up here, which of course is located at the base of the spine. That is our foundation chakra. It's our feelings of being grounded. And of course there are emotional constructs related to these as well. The sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, and of course your heart, your throat, your third eye, and of course your crown. But those are the chakras, and they also have different constructs of our feelings of being grounded, our connection with others, our ability to accept others, our feelings of confidence and being in control of our lives, our ability to love, our ability to communicate, our ability to focus on and see the big picture around us, and of course our self-actualization, our ability to be fully connected spiritually to things. And then of course here we have the inner sanctum, which of course in the classic Cretan story, the Minoan story, it's Theseus goes into the labyrinth and he must confront the Minotaur, which is half man, half animal, our ego and our id, which are subsumed into our superego. And really it's all about not separating these parts of ourselves, but rather of creating a coalescence of all of ourselves, of the body and the spirit. So physical and emotional connections as well as mental, and bringing those all together through some worthwhile trance work. At least that's how I feel about it. I think that's important. That there's also another way of looking at the labyrinth journey. As you enter into trance, you go through a meditative state, and that would be the hero's journey or mythic structure. At the university I teach literature and film, and I teach my students about mythic structure. And so each of the circuits or sub-circuits, each area, we have the departure, we have the initiation and return, or the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, the supernatural aid, crossing the first threshold, and the belly of the whale, so to speak. And of course we go into the initiation or the special world, the adventure itself, the road of trials, meeting with the goddess, temptation, atonement with the Father, apotheosis, and the ultimate boon, and then the return to the ordinary world with the elixir, of course, is refusal of the return, the magic flight, or a rescue from without, crossing or the returning threshold, mastery of the two worlds, and freedom to live. And that is an adaptation of mythic structure applied to the labyrinth. As you enter into the labyrinth, you put yourself into trance and go through this wonderful process. It's a trance walk, so to speak. But that's a wonderful, wonderful adaptation. Now, I said there are different approaches to the labyrinth. You can have very simple and very straightforward, or you can have much more complex ones. Let's look at how they're structured, how they're put together. And you can actually draw your own labyrinth, either large ones or as a finger doodle. For instance, here, when I enter in here, I can drop myself into trance and just introspectively follow the path. And some people do use finger labyrinths. Either they draw themselves, or you can purchase some wonderful ones with grooves, or do the large ones. The trance walk is a wonderful experience. And yes, you can enter experiential trance and walk a labyrinth. Okay, so this is the 3-circuit labyrinth, and if we look at that, we can see how it's structured. Now, how would you put this together? You can do it very freehand. If I'm in a meeting and got nothing else to do, or I'm not paying attention, or I'm just doodling, I'll doodle labyrinths, drop into trance and do some things. I do a lot of automatism work on my own. So sometimes I'll just do automatic writing, automatic drawing, and sometimes I'll do some labyrinth work. But how do you draw this? Very simple, actually. It's amazingly simple. Okay, so we start with what's called the seed pattern, which is I make a little cross, pop some dots up here in the corners, and from the center you just draw over and connect to the first dot. Once you have a connection, you then go from the next dot and connect over here. And essentially, you're just going from spaces and drawing connections, leaving enough space to create your labyrinth. Okay, and you end up with that. Simple process. There's that seed pattern. Seed patterns are the beginning points of creating a particular design. This is the seed pattern for a 3-circuit labyrinth, the classic style. Now there are other labyrinths. I showed you a 5-circuit labyrinth. What's the seed pattern for that? Okay, sorry. This is the 3-circuit labyrinth. See the seed pattern here. Now there's a 5-circuit. Here's our other seed pattern. Instead of a dot here, we have corners. Create corners, and then you do your drawing. You always start from the center post, and you just connect things, and you'll end up with that 5-circuit. Now this is our classic 7-circuit labyrinth, and this is the one that most people are familiar with, and most cultures have variations of this one, of the 7-circuit labyrinth. So let's see how we put that sucker together. Well, we're going to want to start out with our seed pattern. It's a little more complex. Remember, our 3rd circuit was just dot here, and the 5 circuit was just here, but we add the dots out here. And from this seed, we can create a 7-circuit labyrinth. Now you're going to want to space things so that you have the right amount of space. So let's get started. Here we have a blank sheet, and we're going to draw ourselves a 7-circuit labyrinth. I've already done all the steps because to do this live, it's a pain in the rear. So let's start out with our first stroke. Start there. Boom. That's how all labyrinths start, or all classic labyrinths start. And after we've got this, we do that. You get your walls in. Remember, this is essentially a 5-circuit now. This is a 5-circuit labyrinth seed, but we want that 7 circuits. So we add our dots. Add your dots, and that gives us that seed pattern for the classic 7-circuit labyrinth. So from that seed pattern, we're ready to go. Now what are we going to do? We're going to take this center post and we're going to connect it to the next spot. The next spot. So there you go. Boom. Center post connected. Then we're going to take the next spot and connect it over here. You just keep going this direction. We've got that. Now we're going to take this sucker and we're just going to go all the way over here to the next one. So you're just following around. You go round and round we go. So let's go from here over to here, and boom, we've got that. Now you want to make your curves well. You want to make it all pretty. This is from me doing it freehand, and so it may not be quite as pretty. And we're going to go from the next spot here, and we're going to pop all the way over here. Okay? Not from here. We've already gone from here to here. So we're going to go from the next spot, the next post, and we're going to go all the way over here, and there you go. Now you can see we've got a head forming up here, so we want to have lots of space here, and down here we're going to have our mouth, and so everything builds up. So don't put your seed in the center of the paper or in the center of the field. You want to put it a little toward the bottom. All right, so now we're going to go here, And we're just going to pop that puppy all the way over here and see what happens. Boom. It's shaping up. You can see that the circuits already going there. I can go from the goal. Obviously, the goal is here. We actually build that up first, and that's already got some meandering. Already got some meandering here. Okay, now we want to go on for the next circuit, and that next circuit's going to go all the way on the outside to that dot. So we go from a post, a supplemental post or tertiary post. We're going all the way to the dot. Okay, so let's see how that looks. We're almost there. Looks like we're running out of things to draw with, but we've got the dot. We're going all the way around to a tertiary post. Okay, so it's actually alternating back and forth between post and dot, tertiary and main posts. And there we go. That looks good. Now we're going to go from here. We're taking that sucker all the way around. This is our outside circuit. This is circuit number 1. It's going to go all the way on the outside and connect with the root post. And that, my friends, is a classical 7-circuit or Minoan or Cretan labyrinth. Now that doesn't look as nice as what I was showing you earlier, because this is done freehand and I suck much. Obviously, if you're doing this outdoors, you're going to want to do this really nicely, so you're going to measure things. And if you're doing a walking path, you want to make sure you measure out your distances. How thick is your wall, and then how thick should your circuits or the path be. So this is a freehand kind of thing. Let's clean it up a bit. There we go. That looks so much prettier, doesn't it? But that's your classical 7-circuit labyrinth. And from there you can go all sorts of wonderful things. You do your path work and just walk yourself right through that sucker. Okay, so you got your 3-circuit and your 5-circuit, and of course the 7-circuit, which is the classic most people play with. But from a 7-circuit, you can keep going. You can go to a 9-circuit. You can go to an 11-circuit, starting to get really complex. 13-circuit, or you can get into some recursive loops. Recursive loop patterns are like the cathedral, where things go, it actually goes in and around upon itself, and there are some variations placed in here artificially to create some wonderful, wonderful paths for the meander. And so this is a beautiful one. That's not too bad. Here, if you want a simple, straightforward, easy to manage style, is the classic style, and then you get into these variations that almost become mazes, but they're not mazes. It's still a meander. Okay, and of course there's different types of labyrinths you can play with for spiritual paths, and so we get some really interesting things going on. But that is the experiential trance labyrinth. Just breathe in, breathe out, and start walking, or breathe in, breathe out, trance, and just put your finger up there and let your finger do the walking. This has been Dr. Brian David Phillips, and I'd like to welcome you to my website, www.briandavidphillips.com, and I hope you have enjoyed this. So, live, trance, and prosper. Bye-bye.